Hi, fourth grade. It's Mrs. Wright here. I don't know if you can see it, but I have on my BU shirt today. Thought I'd wear the B because, well, the pollen is crazy out there and the bees are being themselves today and doing exactly what they're supposed to. But my allergies are starting to kick in. So today is Homer P. Figg, chapter 17. And, I kind of thought maybe I wouldn't read today. I don't know, wasn't really feeling it, but maybe you guys could do a summary about what you've already read so far, or you could do another book report. What do you think? No? Okay. April Fool's. I know, that was a terrible one. Anyway, today is April 1st, and it is April Fool's Day, so if you're going to play a prank on somebody, make sure nobody gets hurt. Make sure it's all in good fun. But today is April Fool's Day. So we are starting a new month, and I'm going to read chapter 17 for you. And this is called Message for Homer Figg. Live in a barn, and you get used to having all kinds of creatures around. Horses and cows and pigs and wild things like owls and mice and snakes. One time, Harold and I watched a fat black snake swallow a little gray mouse. It was the most amazing thing because the mouse never moved or tried to get away. It was like the mouse knew it was snake food and didn't want to make any trouble. That's pretty much how Mr. Willow acts with the beautiful Kate Nibley. His eyes even blink like mouse eyes, and he shivers like a mouse whenever she says things like, "Oh, really, Webster? How simply fascinating." Or, "What's your opinion, Webster? Should I wear a pearl necklace, or do you prefer amber?" Haven't known her 5 minutes, and already she's Kate and he's Webster, and you'd think they'd been sweethearts for years. We're sitting in a little restaurant at the steamship terminal eating buttered muffins dipped in chocolate and a glass of ice-cold milk. Miss Nibley is busy making Mr. Willow feel like he's the most important man who has ever lived, and her brother Frank is being ever so nice to me. "You say your brother was sold into the army? Extraordinary. What a terrible injustice. The whole purpose of the war is to end slavery, is it not?" "I don't know what the purpose of the war is," I tell him, talking around a mouthful of muffins. "I just don't want Harold to get killed is all." "Of course you don't," Frank says, sipping delicately at his glass of milk. "The loyal brother, how touching. And you say this urgent journey to free your brother is being financed by Jebediah Brewster of the famous Brewster Mines?" I didn't say no such thing, but Mr. Willow did, blurting out all of the private business the first time Mrs. Nibley asked. "Mr. Brewster is testing his character by sending him as my guardian, and how he has letters of introduction to very important people, and how he has been instructed to purchase Harold's release if it comes to that. He does everything but show her the money entrusted to him by Mr. Brewster, and that's only because I jump on his shoe." "Homer, what's gotten into you?" he asks, rubbing his skinny foot. "Time we got on the ship, Mr. Willow." "There's no hurry," said Frank Nibley, showing me his teeth. No hurry at all. But the other passengers are saying their goodbyes and starting to board on the steamship Orion, and the stewards are loading the trunks and the baggage, and clouds of smoke are coming out of the smokestack. Mr. Willow finally notices what's happening and jumps up like someone stuck him with a darning needle. "The boy is right," he blurts out. "We must go. We can't miss the ship." When Mr. Willow makes it clear we really do have to board, I figure that will be the end of it, because something tells me the Nibleys don't really have tickets for the steamship, but want to trick us into missing the boat so that they can figure out how to fool Mr. Willow into giving them the money. Thereafter the money. I know it, and Frank knows it, and Kate knows it. The only one who doesn't know anything about it is poor Mr. Willow. I grab him by the cuff and drag him to the gangway into the crowd of passengers who are boarding. He keeps looking back at Miss Nibley, and she keeps batting her eyelashes. But finally, we're at the top of the gangway, and a man is asking for our tickets. Tickets, tickets, says Mr. Willow, looking confused. He pats his pockets and his heart sinks. But then he finds an envelope and hands over the tickets, and the man is shooing us aboard, telling us to make way for the other passengers. My idea is to hurry along to the cabins, but Mr. Willow turns back to the rail, looking for Miss Nibley into the crowd below. Frank and Kate are nowhere to be seen. Where could she have gone? Mr. Willow wants to know. It's on my tongue to say they're off looking for another sucker, but the poor man looks so hurt I decide to keep my mouth shut. If the cabins on the steamship Orion were any smaller, they'd be cages, and me and Mr. Willow would be clucking like chickens. There's barely room to open the door, and the bunks are so short and narrow that Mr. Willow has to practically fold himself in half so he can lie down. It's not so bad for me. I'm mostly fit. From the top of the bunk, I can see out a little window. I lie there and watch the light fade from the sky until the stars come out. We could walk the promenade deck like most of the other passengers are doing, or visit the dining room, or maybe even explore the steam engines, or tour the wheelhouse. But Mr. Willow doesn't want to leave the cabin. I've never seen a man go so lovesick. But there's no doubt about what's wrong with Mr. Webster Willow. He's pining for Kate Nibley. A few hours ago, he never knew she existed, and now he can't live without her. You need to see a doctor, I advise. Maybe get some pills or some leeches to draw the sick blood out. Shut up, Homer. See, if you're feeling well, you'd never tell anyone to shut up. You're much too polite. Go away and leave me alone. Can't, I say, from my perch at the top bunk. You're my guardian. If I was to fall off the ship or jump into the boiler, Mr. Brewster would hold you responsible and you'd never get your own congregation. Jump off the ship for all I care, he says, his voice muffled by the pillow he's hugging to his face. You never liked her, he wails. It's all your fault. There's a bunch of things I could tell him, if only he'd listen. How it is as plain as the long skinny nose on his face that Miss Nibley doesn't really care about him, but only about the money. How one liar can always recognize another, and I right away recognized two of them in Frank and Kate Nibley, from the moment she pretended to fall into Mr. Willow's arms. How some folks are just naturally decent and truthful like Harold and Mr. Willow, and others, and are always scheming and taking advantage. I could tell him all of these things, but Mr. Willow jams the pillow over his head, so I'm left talking to myself and listening to the steady throb of the great steam engine and feeling the steady whoosh of the water running by the hull. Whoosh, 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 like the ocean is telling me a story, but I can't hear it until I'm sound asleep. When the knock comes on the cabin door, I wake up so fast I bump my head on the ceiling. Homer Figg! Message for Homer Figg! Mr. Willow is snoring like a sawmill, so it's up to me to jump down from the bunk and open the cabin door. A ship's steward stands in the passageway. He's wearing a funny little hat that buckles under his chin and a smart uniform with gold stripes running down his trousers and tight little shoes polished like black mirrors, and clean white gloves on his elegant little hands. His little eyes are as cold as chips of black ice. Homer Figg? Yes, sir, that's me. The captain has requested your presence, he announces. Sounds very full of himself. Follow me, please. If the captain wants to see me, I must have done something wrong, but I can't for the life of me think of what that could have been, since so far I've been in the cabin the whole trip, looking out for poor Mr. Willow. Still, when the cabin of a steamship gives an order, you best comply. So I tuck in my shirt and follow the steward as he marches smartly through the dim passageway and out to the open deck, where the smell of salt and sea wakes me all at once. The steward gives me a stern look, then takes a thick brass key from his pocket and locks the passageway door behind us. Where's the captain? I ask. In his cabin, fast asleep, the steward says, pocketing the key. He touches his hand to his little hat and then slips away into the darkness so fast I don't have time to follow. It comes to me the captain never wanted to see me. Probably he's never even heard of Homer Figg, and that someone has paid the steward to get me out of the cabin and lock the door behind me. I run along the deck looking for another door, but they all seem to be locked from the outside. I start banging on the walls and shouting for Mr. Willow, and finally one of the doors flies open and an old man in a nightshirt wants to know why in the name of thunder I am making such a ruckus. Thanks, much obliged, I say, and scoot past him into the passageway, on a dead run for our cabin before it's too late. But when I get there, Mr. Frank Nibley is already leaning against the wall and studying his fingernails. He gives me a sly little smile and says, "Good evening, Homer. Taking in the night air?" "Where's Mr. Willow?" I demand. "What have you done with him?" "Mr. Willow is fine," he says. "Mr. Willow is dandy." Before I can get around him, the cabin door swings open and out steps the Reverend Webster B. Willow in his best frock coat with Kate Nibley draped on his arm. "Mr. Willow, are you okay? Have you still got the money?" The clergyman has a goofy look on his face, like he's not sure whether he's in this world or the next. But wherever he is happy to be there, like he's been hit on the head with a wooden mallet and likes it. "The most amazing thing has happened," he announced, patting her clever hand. "I am to be married. Mrs. Nibley and I are engaged to be married." Yikes. What? That's crazy. He can't marry her. What? He just met her. That's crazy. So they're concocting a scheme for sure. And Homer's the only one who seems to have any kind of sense about this. So we will have to wait and see what happens tomorrow. Love y'all. Be good. Bye.